Said mommy, mommy, and then he went.
It's all around us, but we don't like to look at it.
My chai tea.
You have to have compassion and empathy.
Guys. Come on.
Hey.
Hi, welcome back to Jake's Nook. So, I have never read a Stephen King book before, and I'm a huge horror fan, but I've never read a Stephen King book until Pet Sematary, which I have read over the past 2 weeks. I did a little reading vlog of it. So, did I like it? Did I hate it? Did I think his prose was bad? Did I find the scaries actually scary? How did I feel about it? You guys are going to find out in this video. Hello. Hi. So, I have Pet Semetary here. I'm so very excited. This is literally my first Stephen King. My first thoughts, just like opening the book. It's one of those books where the chapters like start and end mid-page. And I hate these. Like this, where like chapter 37 just like starts mid-page. These make me so angry. Because I feel like I'm not achieving anything. Like I like when a chapter ends and like I get like a whole extra page of, you know, I'm like reaching the finish line. Like I feel excited when a chapter ends and like I get to like skip a page and get to the next one. Anyway, this cover is cool. I really have no idea what this is about, which is funny because this has been around forever and there's a movie and stuff, but I have literally no idea what this book's about. Like I think of like the Pet Hotel movie. Like, I don't know, that are gonna be like talking animals and they're all friends and stuff. That's what I think. But I picked Pet Sematary because I looked up online what was the scariest Stephen King, and this seemed to be like a typical answer. So I hope that I am genuinely horrified from this. The last time I read a horror book and really, really loved it was Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. I loved that book. I read it over COVID. I haven't read a good horror book since. I'm usually let down. So this better be 10 out of 10 or I'm going to jump off a bridge. So I'm going to make like a prediction off of the cover and the title. I didn't even read the back. I like to go in blind. So my prediction is this man is going to get a job at a cemetery. A pet cemetery. He's going to get a job at a pet cemetery. He's going to start hearing spooky, ooky things at night. And he's going to be like, what? And then he's going to start getting haunted by dead animals. And he's going to think it's cute. And it's going to be like fun at first. But then it's going to go crazy. And he's going to start having like dead people come and haunt him and attack him and be attracted to him. That's my guess. We'll see. I have my tea, my chai tea, and we're ready to begin. Woohoo! Alright, so I'm on page 13, chapter 6, and I just kind of wanted to give my initial thoughts on our characters right off the bat. I like Lewis. I'm loving how like jaded he is. Like he seems like he just like is over the world, and it's kind of iconic of him. Rachel seems like a sweetie. I feel like she's gonna end up being like a casualty in this just because she's like a nice lady, a nice woman, and in the 1980s, you know, they always just get clocked. Eileen, this child, mad dramatic, calm down. And Gage is a cutie pie. Judd seems obviously very nice, but like I don't know. I don't trust nice people in a horror situation, you know? And the last line of chapter 5 is when Rachel says she like can't sleep well in strange houses, and Lewis says it won't be strange for long. Is that some irony, some foreshadowing that it will be strange for very long? Hi. Alright, so this is my check-in right now. I'm on page 96, which is in the middle of chapter 20. I am absolutely like obsessed with this book right now. This is also the first book I started listening to in an audiobook. I had a long drive, so I listened to it on audiobook, and it was really, really fun. I'm loving the talk of like death and like grief and like coping with death. I know that sounds morbid, but it's very intriguing. The way that Lewis looks at life and tries to like justify his actions and the things he's going through with a sense of realism, not realism, but like, yeah, like I guess realism, is really fun. I absolutely adored the scene of after they went to the Pet Sematary for the first time, like all of them with Judd, and when they got back, Ellie was like freaking out, and she was like, let God have his own cat, like this is my cat. I thought that was really, really interesting and like a beautiful way to like show how a child might react to death for the first time. And then the conversation between Lewis and Rachel the next day, or not the next day, like that day later, they just have completely differing opinions on how they should go about it. It just was incredible. I like Rachel and Lewis's explanations both were just made so much sense. And I love that we saw that conversation and argument with them where both like weren't in the wrong necessarily. I think personally I would be more on Rachel's side because Ellie's like 5. I don't think Ellie needs to really like talk about death necessarily yet to be, you know, like not lied to. Oh my god, and Lewis saying that children never forget the lies that their parents tell them when they're a kid, and that one day they're gonna like turn in the report card of lies that were told to them throughout their childhood. The way that was said was actually insane. Like I sat there and thought about it and I was just like, oh my gosh, that is so cool. But and it's interesting the way that Lewis looks at that, because you know, for me, I almost respect an adult who's able to kind of phrase things in a way that make a child happy when they're not ready to necessarily like learn about the like how freaking sad and crazy life can get, and you know, the more graphic parts of it. But for someone like Lewis, who is just like a straight up intellectual, he's a doctor, like he thinks everything logically, it's quite interesting that he has never forgotten the fact that his parents lied to him about where babies come from when he was a kid. Something about me like really likes Lewis, but like I think it's because I partly can like relate and connect to him on the fact that he tends to look at things pretty logically. But I think obviously there's like a line that needs to be drawn where you have to have compassion and empathy that he seems to be pretty lacking in overall as a character. So I'm intrigued to see where this goes, because we're obviously like already getting him put up against his beliefs and the way he looks at the world, because he's like being haunted in his dreams, but like they might not actually be dreams. And him trying to have to logically come up with a reason for that. You know, we have to come up with reasons for the crazy things that we experience, especially in horror movies. That's like or horror things. It's a big trope that a lot of the times the main character is someone who is more of a logical person, because then they're put up against the paranormal, which, you know, is something that conflicts with their belief system. Yeah, I'll check in another time. At least like this time, Ellie saying, did she cause enormous heart attack because like she didn't want the apple? And then he says, when you were with those ghosts, and her response is, they weren't ghosts.
just the Buttinger twins. Does she have any childhood whimsy? Is she an oddball? Is she weird? I'm thinking she's on her way to being a weird little child who walks around with dead creatures. Maybe Mr. Church is gonna die and she's gonna carry around the dead cat. Who knows?
Alrighty, hi. So this is my check-in about halfway through Pet Sematary. I've been listening to most of it on audiobook, and first of all, my experience on that has been really fun. I've been having it on like long car rides and when I was like putting away my clothes. So it was like nice to be able to listen to it more, you know? But anyway, the story. I'm like obsessed with it. I'm really curious to see where it goes because Lewis brought Church back to life. Church is acting weird, and now Norma just died, like Judd's wife, and I'm very curious to see where this goes because like this has to go into them bringing a person back to life. Like it has to, right? I honestly thought Gage was gonna die in the one scene, like when Rachel, Ellie, and Gage get back from seeing Rachel's parents. I literally thought that Gage was gonna die because he starts choking, and then like he was gonna take him to the Pet Sematary. Like that's literally what I thought, but that didn't happen. But I just like don't see a world right now where this book ends and we don't have someone brought back to life, you know, and they're all like zombified. But yeah, I'm like obsessed with the conversation around like death that has been continual in this story. And we just got Rachel's backstory on her sister, on Zelda, and like helps explain a lot of like the why she was like really upset about Ellie finding out about death at such a young age, because like she has so much trauma from it and she doesn't want her daughter to experience that, which like makes me kind of sad. It like was literally making me tear up. And it's funny, we already see Lewis like kind of changing and like softening throughout this book. I feel like in the beginning he's quite hard, and he's already kind of like, I don't know, being much more patient with like Rachel and his daughters. But yeah, I'm like genuinely spooked. I'm listening to it on Everand right now on like a free trial, and like the guy that's reading it was literally freaking me out. Like he was like doing the sounds that were like in the forest on their way to the burial grounds, and he was like, whoa, and I was like genuinely getting chills. And I think that's power to the person reading the audiobook, but still it's just so good. I love the way he writes, and I love the story he's telling. My guess is like maybe Ellie will die and Lewis will bring her back to life at the cemetery, at the burial grounds. Maybe. I don't know. Oh my gosh, I'm just like really excited to see where it goes, because I like love the fact that he was haunted by, like the fact that he was haunted by the guy that got killed in the car accident, but then he was like, it's fine, and he like kind of fought it. It reminded me of Haunting of Hill House, where they kind of just have to like decide that they're not haunted anymore. And like that's like literally what he did, where you have to like face your trauma, you know. So yeah, what was my original guess? Is that the pets were gonna come back to life and then people were? I think I'm gonna win. I literally think I'm gonna win. And I think like Judd is gonna end up being like a hero type, not hero, but like in the beginning I thought he was gonna be like a bad guy, but I'm convinced that he's gonna stay as like a more moral figure for the rest of the story. Yeah, but I'm really loving it so far. We have this lovely scene. Gage and Daddy Lewis flying a beautiful kite. And do you know what this scene ends with? I love you, Gage, he said. It was between the two of them, and that was all right. And Gage, who now had less than 2 months to live, Like, what? What the heck is gonna happen to him? What do you mean? And like, I started to peek ahead. We're about to go into part 2, the Micmac burial ground. Oh my god. I love him. I'm so sad. Okay, I'm kind of pissed because I just literally recorded like 10 minutes of me talking and then it didn't save. However, I guess I'll start over. I just finished the second to last part of Pet Sematary. I'm going into the final part titled Oz the Great and Tellable, and I'm so excited. First of all, can I just say, I made some tea, by the way. It's like a chai tea latte mix. Anywho's, I am shocked that Gage actually got resurrected. I literally thought that this book was going to end with Lewis in the Pet Semetary, or the Micmac burial ground, I should say, and then like Rachel or Judd or whoever shows up, and they're like, "No, Lewis, don't do it," and he's like, "Oh, okay, you're right." But no, Lewis went full crazy person, and no one was there to stop him. That brings me to my next thing that I'm loving about this book so far. I love how there's this like dark magic coming from the Micmac burial ground. However, I have been reading it, and I don't know if it's meant to be read this way, but I kind of find it more interesting this way, that there actually isn't any like magic coming or like hard like things coming from this burial ground, and it's that like it's just like kind of exemplifying how human beings cope with grief and trauma with like confirmation bias and kind of just believing the things they want to believe to like cope. And like Rachel, who is tired and is having trouble getting back to Ludlow, she's saying like, oh, like something like God doesn't want me to get there, and Judd is falling asleep at his house when he's supposed to be watching for Lewis, and he's like, oh, like the Micmac burial grounds are like keeping me from getting there, like, you know, it's this dark magic. And you know, I think as people, a lot of the times we like to take blame off ourselves, put it in like a god or in someone else, just in general, and especially in the tragedy that is happening to the Creed family. I find it so fascinating that Lewis is not able to rationalize it at all. You know, he's set up as this character that is extremely smart. He's a doctor. In the beginning, him and Rachel have this ideological difference of how to look at death and how to deal with trauma. And then he can't cope. It's just so fascinating. I'm just so excited to see how this ends, because we had Gage, presumably, come and take something shiny and silver out of Lewis's medical bag. Is he gonna kill Lewis? I don't know. I'm so excited. I've loved how dark this is. I love how cynical this book has been. I find it written in this kind of academic way that I find really interesting. And I just think this book has been a really good story of exploring how humans deal with trauma and the way that we cope and the way that we work through our pain in ways that could be very unhealthy or just completely, you know, you're detaching yourself. Detaching yourself from reality is a very common way to cope. Like dissociating is a very common anxiety response. So yeah, I think that like I take away from this book so far, I mean, without reading the last part, I have like 30 pages left. Without reading the last part, I think this book has been such a good way of showing how we as humans like don't like to look at death. It's all around us, but we don't like to look at it. And we try to cope with it in different ways. How like Rachel is just completely avoidant of it at first. Lewis tries to rationalize it, but then like they both chalk up these negative things that are happening in their life at the end to some divine faith, to God, to this dark power in the Micmac burial ground. When in reality, I'm looking at it metaphorically. Like, I don't think there's actually this dark power there. Like, I genuinely think it's just Lewis being like, oh my gosh, like, I really want Gage back. Oh my gosh, I'm being pulled there to do it, you know? And I've loved the metaphor of Oz the Great and Terrible and how, like, death is just always around us. It's always lurking around the corner, like, waiting for us to take us. Like, when we take a shower, it's in there with us. When we're drinking tea, it's with us. Like, and how he explained that even at Disney World, like, that was such a beautiful way, while also reminiscing, like, or calling forward to Gage and, like, this dream that he had of them. Like, it's just like, it's like, it's sad with that whole thing, but like the Gage thing, but it's true. Like, even in Disney World where everything is just happy and rainbows, like, it's disguised, but the people waiting to deal with death are there because anyone at any moment could just die. You know, it's dark, but I'm loving it. OMG. I have finished Pet Sematary. Guys, come on. Five stars. I'm obsessed with the way they close this story. Oh my god. I'm just in shock. I cried. I looked like this at my book. I can't believe that. I can't believe Rachel died. That shocked me. What the heck happened with Ellie? The fact that it closed with Steve's point of view, so interesting. I love that it ended like that. That it didn't end with a random Lewis thing. Like, the fact that we had an outsider point of view at the very end. I can't believe he went to I can't believe he resurrected her. I can't believe he did that. He's just lost his mind. I guess that's the click. In that last chapter, like, the click, his sanity, gone. Gone. Oh my gosh. This is the kind of book where I sit and, like, I research after it. Like, I Google, like, fan art and I Google fan theories and I just sit and research it. What a hit. What a hit. These are my thoughts right after putting down the book. Like, I literally just finished this 3 seconds ago. That whole last part, I was just like speeding through everything. Like, dashing, like Sonic speeding through everything. It was just so good. Like, oh my gosh. Like, it really didn't end up going where I thought it was gonna go at all. Like, it was darker, which is, like, I love that. And, like, I know that Stephen King is, like, known to not be afraid to get dark, but I've never read a Stephen King book, so I'm just, like, so happy with how it went. I loved our last, like, the epilogue. Like, we had our last chapter with Steve, and then we got the epilogue of, like, her putting her hand on his shoulder. Like, do you think that she came back okay? I don't think so. I doubt it. The Wendigo is out for everyone. I feel like there's an ambiguity to that last scene because she, like, says hello darling. Gage said mommy mommy, and then he went period. As you could tell, Pet Sematary was a hit for me. I absolutely adored this book. Absolutely adored it. It made me, over the weekend, get another Stephen King book. So, talking about this book, starting with the plot, I absolutely adored the way that this focused and centered around death and grief in a really honest way, and had a lot to do with escapism and avoidance and lying to ourselves and confirmation bias. And I thought it was done incredibly well. We meet Lewis and we meet Rachel and Ellie and Gage. We're introduced to Judd. Everything that happens after that is just like a slow spiral of darkness and gloom and grim. And it was really, really good. Every time that you thought things were going to get better, they didn't. They got worse. And as a reader who loves dark things, it was a hit for me. I love darkness. I could sit in that gloom and complete cynicism that this book was filled with constantly. And the plot was just so engaging. Some of my favorite parts, like off the top of my head, I loved the kite scene. The final sequence was outstanding. It was just really genuinely horrifying. Plot-wise, like I don't really think there was a scene that I was reading ever that I was like, why is this here? Like the first trip to the Pet Sematary, incredible. I literally made this crazy prediction that I thought that he was dead. Like Lewis had been dead the whole time, but clearly I don't think that's what happened. But yes, the plot was amazing. Next, I want to talk about pacing. I personally like the pacing of this. I kept switching between audiobook and actually reading it, and I think audiobook makes things easier to get through. So I don't know if maybe if I was just reading it all the way through, I would have had a little bit more issues with the pacing, but I really didn't find a single issue with it. If you don't like books that aren't like, bah, 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 like maybe this wouldn't be for you. It's not a thriller. It's in the typical sense of the word. It's not like a suspense book where you're constantly wanting to find out what happens the next second. I was turning the pages like crazy, but I wouldn't call it a page turner. Now, going into writing style, it's funny. After I finished this book, I looked up Pet Sematary online and just kind of got like some random tidbits on the internet, and I saw that a lot of people do not like Stephen King's prose. Like they don't find it like good writing, which I find weird. It has this matter-of-factness to it about everything that is incredibly engaging. I think that the way that Stephen King writes with this dark cynicism sets the tone for the story in a way that I don't think another way of telling the story would work. I think that you need to have that dark humor. You need to have that grief that just permeates through every page. You need to have this long-winded explanation from a character about something that happened years ago for what's happening now to make sense, for grief to make sense. Like, this is a story about circular trauma and grief and how it affects us throughout the rest of our lives, and the way that he wrote it with the cynicism and going back and forth between the past and the present and these multiple points of views from the different characters, like, it works for this story. It's incredible. I don't have an issue with the writing style at all, and there were really beautiful metaphors throughout the story. And I think there's the one metaphor overall of Oz the Great and Tellable that just is completely overarching in the entire story. That's just this metaphor that he keeps bringing back, and that circular writing style is something that I also find really interesting in this book. He tells us things, and then it keeps coming back in a new way over and over and over again throughout the story. No piece of information was just like kind of dropped there and like never brought back. A man's heart is stonier. He grows what he can and tends it. These lines that just stick with you because he wrote it in this circular matter that I think is almost also metaphorical for just like the circle of life. And I don't know. It was just really, really beautiful. Like I said, the vibe of the story is quite dark. The vibe is cynical. The vibe is sarcastic. There's a dark humor that is sprinkled throughout this book, which can seem almost unsettling. I would say it's like a dark humor book. Like at times, like I feel like there's like a comedic element to it, and the way that Lewis thinks and the way that Stephen King writes his characters. And I love that vibe. I love it. I absolutely adored it. Like I said, I love dark vibes, and I love that it was such an interesting way of dealing with death and those feelings and like being like, it is what it is. Let me laugh about it. And lastly, like talking about the characters, I loved Lewis. I really liked Rachel. I was sussed out by Ellie the whole time. I really thought she was going to turn evil and murder everyone, but guess who did turn evil and murder everyone? Not Ellie. Judd was cool. I really loved him. Rachel's parents' characters were really placed well in the story. In conclusion, I will be reading another Stephen King. I will be thinking about Pet Sematary for a long time. Wow, I'm just so happy. It's crazy to say happy after reading this book, but it's quite dark. Stephen King said it was like his darkest book he felt like he ever wrote, and I get it. And there's something special about that. Facing those uncomfortable truths that like your children could die at any moment. But Oz the Great and Terrible is always around. And I think that genuinely will stick with me. That Oz the Great and Terrible could literally get me at any moment. 5 stars for Pet Sematary. As a horror fan, I'm so glad I read my first Stephen King. I get why people call him the king of horror. He deserves it. This was outstanding. I can't wait to read another one. I loved it. All right. So thank you for watching. I will see you next time and have a lovely day. Bye.